Greetings. I'm Dr. ELAINE DISPO-RENDON, the founder of Anak 501c3 public charity for bereaved families, and this is a recording of my run-through for my grief awareness and sensory healing information session for the Healthy Mindspace Initiative Employee Resource Group at Purdue University Global, as we approach Mental Health Awareness Month in May, when my live presentation will take place. Today's talking points will involve my intro bio to offer my credentials, introducing grief with the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, and why. A grief awareness calendar with recommended times of the year to remember lost loved ones, and will mainly cover sensory healing through the 5 perception senses, including sound, sight, and smell, which are the 3 S's, and taste and touch, which are the 2 T's. For the live session, I will give a quick quiz with the incentive of one winner being awarded our latest Anak book, which is called Cope with Hope, Deal to Heal. And for viewers who comment on the video, will have a chance to win the book as well. And last but not least, I'll also present my recommended sources, which are not affiliated with Purdue Global. So for myself, as your faith-based and culturally inclusive grief supporter, I teach as an adjunct with Purdue Global's Education and Communication Department, including our new Doctor of Education in Leadership and Innovation Applied Research, as well as communication courses. My passion project involves my Anak 501c3 charity, which is actually linked from this slide, but I'll also have the link in our video description box. And through Anak, I serve as a certified grief counselor and pet loss grief support specialist through the American Institute of Healthcare Professionals. And with the AIHCP, I designed and teach my grief diversity curriculum. Through Anak, I've published 7 books to help grievers heal and have presented several grief workshops from my Dr. ELAINE J. Dispo YouTube channel, as well as some on our Anak.org YouTube channel. And my husband, Chef Dave, is a corporate executive chef and culinary educator, and together we are proud parents to our cats and angels in the Texas Rio Grande Valley, including Lilo Toulouse, who died after I initially prepared this slideshow. So, to be honest, I'm really in the thick of my grief for her right now, and I dedicate this presentation to her. I am grieving now, but even while I was getting this slide deck together, I already had been grieving because she was diagnosed with lymphoma, an incurable cancer, almost 3 months before she died, in addition to pancreatitis. And during her last week of life, she also was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease and diabetes that may have spurred on from her steroids that she took while under chemotherapy. So she had a lot of illnesses and was no longer the same thriving, healthy cat who we were used to and who we miss so much. And one thing that I enjoyed doing with Lilo, as well as her older sisters, Annie, who is still alive, and Asia, who is buried by Lilo, was that we would watch games together usually football and basketball. And the day that Lilo died, Purdue advanced into the Sweet 16 for March Madness, and they went all the way to the 2024 NCAA Men's Division I National Championship for basketball 2 weeks after we buried Lilo, which actually is 3 weeks from the day of the presentation. And even while she was still alive, like I mentioned, I had encountered anticipatory grief, meaning that a loss is expected, but we're already experiencing that grief and trying as much as we can to prepare, but we can never be too prepared for a loss. Now, my family and I are in the bereavement process, which involves the period after losing someone to death. But grief can be experienced with any other type of loss, including a loved one, not always to death, but perhaps during displacement, during separation, or even losing something important like a job or a home, or going through a life transition, including an empty nest when children move away from home, or going through a health problem because we're no longer functioning the way that we've been accustomed to. And this segues into the 5 W's of grief. But first, I'll share with you a quote from an interview with Regina King that Robin Roberts conducted actually just a week and a half, 10 days before Lilo died in March of 2024. Robin had asked actress Regina about her son Ian's death. And Regina said, "Grief is love that has no place to go." And she attributed her favorite role as Ian's mom. And this was the first time that Regina really had that space to speak more openly and candidly to the public about being a bereaved mother of her only child. And actually, at the time that I'm scheduled to present the live presentation, Bereaved Mother's Day will be coming up the first Sunday of May, which is a week before Mother's Day. Here are the 5 grief W's. Who? We grieve for someone who's important to us, but sometimes it may not be somebody else. Maybe we're even grieving our own former selves after a traumatic experience or a life transition. Whether we were abused and we're grieving who we used to be prior to that trauma, or we were once healthy and active and vibrant, and we're grieving for who we once were prior to our health issues. What do we grieve? We grieve our memories that meant so much to us because they're no longer in our present, they're now in our past. And grieving is yearning, it's longing for who we lost or what we lost. Where do we grieve? We may feel comfortable grieving in safe spaces, but full transparency, sometimes any place where it hits hard will just conjure up grief or remind us of our loss. So there may be times when we sense a trigger and we may grieve somewhere where we don't expect to grieve. When do we grieve? Anytime during and after loss, especially an important date. Now, I've lost both of my babies during the first trimester, and that's my first pregnancy loss was actually what prompted me to start Anak, and I lost my first adult pet during the establishment of Anak, and the day before my first board meeting, I buried my second child. Well, when I was approaching the first anniversary of my first child's due date, which actually is coming up, I actually have a lot of important dates that include the due dates of both of my unborn children, the adoption anniversary of my oldest cat, Asia, as well as the day of her death. And when I approached the first due date of my Angel, which is actually part of the acronym for Anak, I started to feel really down during the month of May, and I realized it may have been because I somewhat sensed that this would have been the time I would have given birth to my first child. And since I miscarried during my first trimester, I didn't know which gender either of my children were going to be born with. But it's just one of those experiences that many of us encounter during grief, that when we're approaching birthdays or anniversaries or other special days involving a loved one or involving the time when grief hit us, we may approach it with dread, or we may intentionally try to make it a happy time. But with us approaching Mental Health Awareness Month, we must acknowledge that it is okay not to be okay. We're going through grief. We don't have to force ourselves to be happy. We don't have to be ignoring our emotions either. As a matter of fact, this past weekend, I received this journal that was just released a week ago called Embrace Your Emotions. The author actually comes from Indiana, which is Purdue's home state. And it is a matter of being aware of our feelings during our grief and even when we heal, because grief is never going to go completely away. There may be times when it still hits us. I call grief waves as a metaphor because the ebbs and flow can be various. And sometimes we have that tidal wave when we feel like we're drowning and we want to come up for air. But there may be times when the storm is calm. And, you know, when we're steady, we're just weathering the storm. We're pressing through. Last but not least, why do we grieve? We grieve deeply because we loved deeply. If the thing or the person or the animal or the place that we're grieving meant so much to us, then of course it's going to hit us hard if we lose them. Grief is anywhere, land, sea, and sky. Again, the metaphor comes up that mourning can be like waves, and we're swimming or we're coasting or we're paddling because it may seem like a struggle. Here are some dates that you may want to mark on your calendar, because they may be dates when, or times of the year, months, some are dedicated to months, where we can commemorate our loved ones, or we can seek support or spread awareness, because some of these that I included in the grief calendar have to do with health awareness. I'm blocking out the middle months here, including May, that's coming up because, again, we have Mental Health Awareness Month, as well as Bereaved Mother's Day that I mentioned earlier. But we also have a Bereaved Father's Day. Since Father's Day is held on the third Sunday of June, Bereaved Father's Day is the week before, which is the second Sunday of June. All of July is the Bereaved Parents Month, and the day before Independence Day for the U.S. is actually Bereaved Parents Day on July 3rd. And then in August, there are a series of them in the tail end of that month. Rainbow Baby Day is on August 22nd. That's actually the day after my birthday. And rainbow babies are babies who are born after the loss of a child, whether it's a biological child or an adopted child, after a parent has lost a previous child. Rainbow Bridge Remembrance Day on August 28th remembers animals who have crossed Rainbow Bridge, and August 30th is Grief Awareness Day. And we are spreading that awareness of grief because it is important. Some people may try to avoid dealing with it because they don't feel comfortable with facing those emotions. But it's very important for the healing process to be able to do so. And that's what this information session is about today, to introduce ourselves to grief and the ways that we can heal through the 5 senses. And of course, we can also remember loved ones who we lost on their birthdays or anniversaries, including anniversaries of the relationship, if there was a relationship milestone there, or death anniversaries, because those times may be difficult, but hopefully there are ways that we can make tribute to our loved ones during these times of year. Now, since I mentioned that I teach communication, I want us to take the approach of both intrapersonal communication, meaning communication within ourselves, and interpersonal communication, which I'm actually teaching this semester. It's communication between two people. In intrapersonal communication, including the sensory healing that we'll cover today, there are ways that we can prioritize our self-care through the healing process while we grieve. And in interpersonal communication, we want to make sure that we value our support system, that we do turn to people who we trust, that we seek professional help if we need it, and we maintain a connection with our loved ones by celebrating those memories that we shared together. Now, I coined this term sensory healing for the sake of grief because I noticed that through all 5 of the perception senses, I, as well as my grief counseling clients, have found healing through each of those 5 senses. Therefore, we can tap into both our intrapersonal within ourselves again, and our interpersonal with others communication skills through experiencing that healing and connecting with our loved ones. Because these methods support catharsis and release. It is so much healthier to let our emotions out, even when we mourn, than to keep them bottled up inside and repressing them, because that can lead to complicated and delayed and prolonged grief later on that isn't resolved. And even though we may not completely heal from our grief, if it is such a deep grief, but engaging in these practices may really help us mend our souls. Here are the 5 senses. Through sound, we listen to soothing sounds that comfort us. Through sight, we look at aesthetically pleasing views. Through the sense of smell, we bask in sweet scents and favorite fragrances, anything that feels pleasant to the nose. Through taste, we have special flavor tributes to our loved ones who we lost, or to an experience that we miss. And last but not least, through the sense of touch, we savor texture and textiles, concrete objects that we can feel. Through sound, this can be accompanied with stretching, meditation, prayer, or journaling, or simply enjoying the sound and being mindful of our thoughts and feelings while healing with sound, in addition to sight and smell, which we'll cover momentarily. Now, one of our first senses while developing in the womb, and last senses while we're still alive, that we are aware of, is our sense of hearing. Therefore, seeking out soothing sounds during grief can help the healing process. We can listen to peaceful music, or simply hear the nature sounds if we're outdoors, or if we're listening to them through our digital methods like Spotify or YouTube. We can also connect with our lost loved ones by jamming out to music we were fans of, or that remind us of them. And we can even tune into a comedian who we may have enjoyed together, or who that loved one would have enjoyed also, for a good laugh. Because yes, grief may be approached with sadness, but having some comic relief can help lift our spirits. Through sound, we also can be content creators by making fine arts through composing a song or poetry lyrics and putting them to music. In this picture, I have my oldest cat, Annie, also known as my Purdue boiler cat, stats cat, faculty feline, with my bassoon pillow, because back in the day, I used to play the bassoon, and I thought that I could heal by playing it again. And since I don't have my own bassoon instrument anymore, I ended up just listening to a quartet perform on the bassoon, and still feel comforted that way. Through sight, we can take in certain views that conjure up positive memories. We can visit places that feel safe, or if we're not able to go there physically, we can at least imagine them in our minds, like during meditation. So that way we can feel serene. We can have our sightseeing at a dedicated relaxation place if we can, have a certain area in our homes or even our office spaces where we can just soften our gaze and enjoy the view, have it be a clear space so it's not cluttered, or go outside where it may look nice, like at the beach or at the forest. My favorite view is my garden, where I have a Marian statue because I'm Catholic, and I've buried my 2 cats and my second baby because I had Divine during the pandemic, and it would have been difficult to get her buried and even have a church mass service at the time. But I go there and I feel connected to my heavenly babies that way, or to my oldest baby Angel's gravesite. We can connect with our loved ones by photoing a destination where we've gone together, or even a new spot where we would have wanted to take them with us. For example, my cousin died the year before last, right after Christmas. And he was a heart attack survivor, but he ultimately died from a stroke. And his widow, who he had been with since they were 10 years old, she lost the love of her life after being with him most of her life. And she goes to places and always posts on her caption that she feels that Chris is with her. And it is nice when you feel like your loved one is still in your heart wherever you take them, and you don't feel as empty because you somehow feel their presence still with you. We can also create visual art as tributes to our loved ones by cultivating a garden, like what I mentioned to you earlier, or drawing or painting. For example, the summer after Angel would have been born, I got a mindfulness journal that actually included adult coloring pages, and that really helped mend my heart at the time. We can also sculpt pottery, if even just that doesn't even just involve the sense of sight. All of these actually involve the sense of touching as well. So feeling the different materials may also bring us comfort. Next up, we have the sense of smell. Pleasant fragrances can help lift our spirits, including fresh air, flowers in full bloom, and food aromas. For example, we buried Lilo with hibiscus because when she lived outside, she would always go to our hibiscus in the garden. And she's buried with a new hibiscus tree. And on Friday of this past week, which marked 5 weeks since her last good day, I saw 5 hibiscus flowers in full bloom, and that was the most I've seen from Lilo's burial site since we put her to rest, and that really just brought me so much joy. And we can also feel like we're connected to our lost loved ones by dabbing on their favorite fragrances if we loved a certain way that they smell, such as in the bath, or if we have their cologne or their perfume or something that reminds us of them. We can also visit their resting place with their favorite flowers, or we can cook their favorite food, which we'll go into more in the next slide for the sense of taste. We can curate a list of those favorite smells to remind ourselves to gather some of them when we need a pick-me-up. Now on to taste, and of course, me being married to a chef, this is one of my favorite senses. And I feel so lucky to have my husband because he has been there so much with preparing memorial meals for our heavenly babies. And this can help for any lost loved one when we commemorate them, including as tributes to them on special days like their birthdays or their anniversaries. For example, one of my grief clients had his dad's birthday coming up during sessions with me, and I suggested preparing a memorial meal for his dad or going to a place where his dad loved to eat. So he and his family went out to dinner at Chili's, and I believe he said Chili's. Either Chili's or Texas Roadhouse, but I guess I'm thinking about Texas Roadhouse because that's my dad's favorite restaurant and he loves the T-bone steak there. So either way, he sent a toast to his dad, just cheering him on in heaven. And we also can include favorite flavors of that loved one or meals that we shared together for nostalgia, or even recipes from generations past. Like, for example, if we lost a grandparent or a parent, maybe prepare a recipe that they passed down to us or something that they enjoyed eating. We can also connect with those lost loved ones by preparing that meal when we want to take time to remember them, even if it's not on a particularly special day like their birthday or anniversary. Maybe we were just reminded of them through a trigger, and having a meal offered to them might cheer ourselves up. Or maybe we can visit an eatery where we have gone with them or wanted to go with them. But at the same time, it shouldn't be forced. Like, if we don't feel comfortable going to a place where we once went with our loved one, that's perfectly okay, because we want to be able to be comfortable through our grief, but at the same time still face our grief. And we can create a menu of these drinks and foods that remind us of them, so we can have it in handy if we want to have that kind of meal to dedicate to them when we miss them or on any of those special days. And last but not least, we have healing with touch. Textures and textiles can be turned to for comfort, such as soft surfaces and fabrics. Like, for me, they include fleece, sweaters, or faux mink blankets. In my book, Cope with Hope, Deal to Heal, I mentioned mink blankets. And after publication, I realized I should have said faux, as in fake mink blankets, because I wasn't talking about real animal fur. And I'm telling you, my cats love the feel of these mink blankets. They knead on them, which is like making biscuits. And they can make biscuits all day on these blankets. And we can connect with our loved ones by wearing a favorite piece of clothing if we have anything from their wardrobe or something that we've worn during a time that we shared together. For example, not necessarily my grandmother's clothing, but I used to have both of the blouses that I wore the last time I was with my grandmothers when they were still alive, but I ended up donating them because they no longer fit me anymore. But every time I would wear them after my grandmothers died, I felt a connection with them because that was the shirt I wore the last time I hugged them. We can also warm ourselves up in a blanket or a coat that reminds us of them, and that can really be soothing as well. And other ways to soothe ourselves through the sense of touch would be a spa-like treatment, like a massage to apply pressure to tense muscles, because grief does affect us both mentally and physically, as well as emotionally. And when we're not feeling our best, our bodies can sense it. We also may apply supple serums to moisturize our skin, like depending on what your skin can take. Certain oils or lotions or moisturizers may help. If they're scented, then they'll appeal to the sense of smell as well. And an added bonus, and for me, I can attest to this, that animals really offer sources of comfort. And studies have shown that petting one can even help increase longevity. So we can be around our animals and they can offer that support to us. Now, of course, a lot of my grief, and for some of you pet lovers who can relate, that grief may involve losing animals, and having other animals by our side doesn't mean that we're replacing the animals who we lost. It's because our heart has that capacity to love that we're opening ourselves to still continue taking care of animals, because they also take care of us. Now, when we are healing, having a journal in handy will really help to track our sensory healing as well as to pour out our emotions. We can also connect with our loved ones this way. For example, when I found out I was pregnant with both of my children, I started writing letters to them. Even after they died, for months after, I would still want to feel that connection with them. But after my miscarriages, I was writing about how I was grieving for them. We can write about how we remember them, our favorite memories with them. And this is also for the sake of developing our self-awareness, because we can go back to our journals after a certain period of time and see how we felt back then, how we dealt with the grief, and where we are now in our healing progress. And again, through intrapersonal communication, we have S for self-care, including the sensory healing that we cover today, in addition to journaling, along with meditation, prayer, and stretching that I mentioned earlier for sight, smell, and sound. And through interpersonal communication, we want to turn to a support system. Now, this doesn't mean that we ought to turn to people who don't agree with our grief, which can mean disenfranchised grief, grief that is frowned upon, such as pregnancy loss or pet loss, because some people out there may not consider pregnancy losses as legitimate because the babies weren't born alive, or pet loss because those aren't people who we're grieving for. So if we're around people who don't agree with that grief, it is okay not to surround ourselves with that toxicity. We want to have positive people around us who are willing to listen to us and offer comfort. And the same goes for anticipatory grief as well. So we are assured that we are not alone, that we do have somebody in our corner who is there for us as we prepare for the loss of a loved one. Now, here are the quiz questions coming up. Those who are here live can answer the questions in our chat box, and the first to answer most of them correctly based on today's session will win a free copy of this book. It has my Annie here on the cover, my oldest survivor girl, Cope with Hope, Deal to Heal, where we introduced sensory healing today. And for those of you who are viewing, we are going to have the opportunity to comment on this video for a chance to win a copy of this ebook as well. Of course, we're not going to go over the answers during this video, but we will during the live recording afterwards to determine who will win the book. Number 1, why would we grieve the loss of ourselves? And I'll give them a moment in between each question, or you can hit pause and write down your answer. Number 2, which month celebrates Rainbow Baby and Rainbow Bridge? Number 3, which sensory healing specifically suggests going outside? And hint, hint, there are at least 2 of the senses. Number 4, which sensory healing specifically suggests preparing memorial food? Another hint, there are also 2 of those senses. And last but not least, which sensory healing also could take place with memorial food? And last clue, there are at least 2 of those senses. All right, we'll go on to our answers for the live session, and then for the recording, we'll see who answers in the comments. Here are the recommended grief support resources that are not vetted by Purdue Global, but I myself as a certified grief counselor can attest to it. Again, I mentioned that I'm certified through the AIHCP, so here's a link to the directory from this slide that I'll also drop into the YouTube description box. And I'm also included in this directory, but there are other certified grief counselors who are located in different places in the world that may be available in person. I offer my grief support sessions virtually through Microsoft Teams. And again, I'm certified in pet loss grief support. So I also offer pet loss grief support specifically, but some of these certified grief counselors also may have other specialty certifications as well. And I have a link to my book, the one that will be awarded to one free live attendee and one viewer of this video. And the link to the book is to purchase the book for proceeds going towards our causes, including our care packages, Marigold Scholarship, and our care packages now also offer grief counseling. And here's a link to our website, anakco.org, and I can be reached at DrDR@anakco.org. And we also are on these social media platforms with the handle @anakco.org. I'll open the floor for questions and comments from our live attendees, and for our viewers, comments are always welcome, including for a chance to win the book with your answers to the quiz questions. And in the meantime, signing off, I want to wish everybody a happy National Bubble Tea Day on April 30th when the live presentation is taking place. And of course, wishing everybody well this Mental Health Awareness Month in May. However, the recording of this video may be released later on. So I do wish everybody involved in viewing this presentation the best with your own respective grief journeys. And this video, again, is dedicated in memory to my Lilo, in addition to her big sister, Asia, as well as her heavenly siblings, Angel, Nevaeh, and Divine Mercy Rendon. Thank you.
3, 2.
You're not see you. I saw Cabernet.